The $5 Decktechs have returned. This time, it's going to be even worse than usual. I hope you enjoy it. We're making a sapperling and fungus deck with an emphasis on spore counters. We have to look toward Dominaria United to get a crappy commander that's affordable. Before we get started, stroke my ego by subscribing and giving me a like. Now on to our bottom of the barrel draft chat bulk bin commander, Nemata Primeval Warden. This Golgari commander does a lot and seems like it should be worth something. It's worth nothing, because if a creature an opponent controls would die, you exile it instead and you get a sapperling. Then you can sacrifice sapperlings to make Nemata huge, and you can sacrifice them for some card advantage. Let's save some pennies and look at some sapperlings. Our first piece of trash is Blight Reaper Thallid. This is just a 2/2 for 2, then you can transform it into Blight Sower Thallid. And when it transforms, you get a sapperling. And when it hits the graveyard, you get a sapperling. It just makes sapperlings, and it's just a couple of pennies. Remember M21 and their commons? I don't. We have one here, Deathbloom Thallid. This is a 3-mana 3/2, and when it hits the graveyard, you get a 1/1 sapperling. Can you believe it? I'm breaking form here and running removal on a deck. We might have a shot at winning. It's Fungal Infection. For 1 mana, you get a creature -1/-1, and you make a sapperling. We actually run some card advantage outside of our commander because we're thinking ahead. Our commander's going to get removed. We got Fungal Plots. Let us sacrifice 2 sapperlings to gain 2 life and draw a card. Thank you, Commander Masters, for reprinting Jade Mage and making it even cheaper. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana. You can pay 3 to make a sapperling. 3 mana for a 1/1 is a great rate for a budget build. If you run into a mirror match with this deck, I'm shocked that 2 people actually built a deck for my video, but Nemata Grove Guardian is going to be garbage. Let you create sapperlings, and then you can sack sapperlings to pump all sapperlings, including your opponents. Overgrown Armasaur is a 4/4 for 5 mana, which is a pretty big creature in our garbage deck. It's got enrage. When it's dealt damage, you make a sapperling token. We need to build an instant board to give us any chance of winning, no matter how slim that is, and it is very slim. That's why we run Sapperling Migration. For 2 mana, you get 2 sapperlings. If you kick it and pay 6, you get 4. Just like Wizards of the Coast, I'm including a backup commander in this precon. Slimefoot the Stowaway. It's going to be a drain effect when sapperlings die, and it lets you make sapperlings. Underseller Myconid is going to allow us to make some sapperlings when it ETBs or hits the graveyard, and it's a mana dork. It's a 3-mana mana dork, which is terrible, but I get a sapperling, which makes it worth it. We couldn't afford Verdant Force with this tight budget, so we included Verdant Embrace. It's going to turn one of your creatures into a Verdant Force and allow you to make those sapperlings at every upkeep. We're going to have a huge board of 1/1s that can't do much. Once again, we have another card that's terrible in the mirror match. That's Verdaloth the Ancient. You can kick it to make a ton of sapperlings, then it boosts all sapperlings and tree folk, no matter who has them in play. If you wanted cards that actually did things, you should probably watch another channel. But we do have Yavimaya Sapherd. When it ETBs, you make a 1/1 sapperling. Now it's time to move on to the fungi. These guys don't really fit with the commander, but they're on theme in my opinion. And being on theme, in my opinion, are all that matter in this tiny worldview that I have. Akawali the Seething Tower is a 3/3 for 3, and it gets bigger when we have our garbage cards hit the graveyard because our threats are non-existent and easy to remove. Brood Rage Mycoid's a 4/3 for 4, and if we descended at our end step, we make a 1/1 fungus creature that can't block and even protect us. And let me tell you, I descend every turn because I have descended into madness with this deck. I'm losing my freaking mind. We need fungus that can actually block. That's why we included Deathcat Marionette. It's a 2-mana 1/1 with Death Touch. It also mills 2 cards when it ETBs, and if we were a graveyard deck, that would be important. Moldfolk is a 1/1 for 2 mana that has lifelink, and you can sacrifice creatures and artifacts to make it bigger. We might be able to gain some life late in the game until this gets hit by a removal spell. Are you shocked that this cut rate fraud LVMTG included another removal spell in a deck tech? You should be. We've got Myconid Spore Tender. For 4 mana, you get a 4/1 that destroys an artifact or an enchantment. Flaccid Rottentail's a fungus rabbit for 1 mana that's a 1/1. It has vigilance, but it gets real hard when it goes to the graveyard when you exile it and put counters on another creature. We need some payoffs for all these sapperlings that we're going to sacrifice or just lose during combat. That's why we have Rot Shambler. For 2 mana, you get a 1/1 that grows huge every time another creature hits the graveyard for us. Spore Crawler may have been overlooked when you're opening Crimson Vow, but it has a place in this deck. It's a 3-mana 3/2, and when it hits the graveyard, you draw a card. I think it's time we include a real card in this deck, Spore Crown Thallid. For 2 mana, you get a 2/2 that boosts all of our other fungus and sapperlings. We might have a board of 2/2s, and that might do some work. Synapse Necromage is a 3/1 that when it hits the bin, we're going to get 2 of those fungus that can't block. I really wish those sapperlings would fit the theme better and be more synergistic. But this is what we have to work with. Let's turn our lands into creatures so they're super easy to remove by our opponents with Tendril of the Myco Tyrant. For 7 mana, you can turn your lands into 7/7s that get swept away in a board wipe. I guess we're making an aristocrat deck because I have another sack outlet, Thallid Omnivore. This fungus lets you sack creatures that make itself huge, and then you gain life if it was a sapperling. We've got to turn our little fun guys into card advantage. We can do that with Thallid Soothsayer. It's going to allow us to sacrifice creatures to draw cards. I think we need to include an accounting feature in this deck. You may be saying, you're a madman, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, we're going to keep track of spore counters, and they really don't do much besides add an extra layer of annoyance to our game plan. I was kidding. Not about the accounting part, but about how spore counters don't actually help us. They really do. In the form of Death Spore Thallid, this 2/2 for 1 mana is going to give us those spore counters on itself, allow us to remove them to make more saplings, then allow us to sacrifice saplings to remove threats. I hope you have a ton of dice ready for the next one, Spore Sower Thallid. It's going to put spore counters on every fungus we control, and then allow us to remove those spore counters to make 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens. There's going to be so many spore counters, you're not going to be able to keep track of them, and that's a fun element to this build. Sporoloth Ancient's going to allow those spore counters we put on random fungi to do something, because creatures we control have removed 2 spore counters, and we create a sapperling. So, all that accounting wasn't for nothing. We have included the original, Thallid. It's a 1/1 for 1 that puts spore counters on itself, and you remove the 3 spore counters, you get a sapperling. Yet again, we have another way to sacrifice sapperlings with Thallid Germinator. It does the same spore counter shenanigans, but this time we can sack sapperlings and make creatures bigger to maybe deal lethal damage. Fingers crossed. Next up, we have a worse version of the original Thallid, Thallid Shell Dweller. This has Defender, so it can't attack, lets us do the spore counter thing, then we remove those spore counters to make sapperlings, and it costs twice the amount that the normal Thallid does. Can you believe it? We have another alternate commander hidden within the deck, Thelon of Havenwood. This elf is going to make all of our fungus creatures huge, equal to the number of spore counters they have. Then it's going to allow us to exile fungi from our graveyard to put spore counters on our fungi. Now it is time to include a card from one of the best sets in all of Magic the Gathering, Fallen Empires, and that's Thorn Thallid. For 3 mana, you get a 2/2, does the same spore counter thing, and you still make sapperlings with it, and the art is absolutely bonkers. We had to slot this into the deck. As you can see, we can make a deck that does a lot of things and has a lot of triggers that you have to keep track of for $5. I think this deck does a great job at making a fun game plan that might not be the strongest, but you still might have a chance at winning. At least I hope you do anyway. So, if you really like this video and you like the deck, the full deck list is in the description. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.